Have you ever felt that subtle nudge from an ad making you think you needed something you didn't even know existed maybe 5 minutes before?
Mhm.
Or perhaps you've looked closely at a marketing term like special and kind of wondered, okay, what does that really mean?
Yeah, those moments happen all the time.
Well, today we're taking a deep dive into that fascinating and, yeah, often complex world where marketing, ethics, and consumer trust all meet.
It's a really important intersection.
We're going to try and unpack some of the tough decisions marketers face, and how those choices ultimately impact all of us.
It's such a critical area because marketing decisions, well, they exist on this whole spectrum, don't they? Ethical, unethical, legal, sometimes illegal.
Right.
But often, that line isn't neat at all. It's actually incredibly blurred. I mean, what one person thinks is perfectly reasonable, someone else might find uh, deeply problematic.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, think about advertising unhealthy food directly to children, for instance. That's a classic one where opinions really diverge.
Okay, yeah.
But ultimately, businesses depend on their customers, right? So failing to meet those, let's say, community expectations for high ethical standards, that's not just an ethical slip-up. It's actually poor marketing.
Mhm.
It undermines the very trust you need.
That's a really crucial point. So our mission today, then, is to sort of pull back the curtain a bit. Look at the main criticisms often aimed at marketing.
Mhm.
We'll maybe uncover some surprising facts along the way and then pivot to look at how businesses are, well, trying to do better, striving for more socially responsible practices.
Things like consumer privacy, which is huge now.
Exactly. The goal is that by the end, you, listening, will have some good insights to be a bit more, discerning and well-informed out there in the marketplace.
Yeah, I'm good.
So it's often said, isn't it, that marketing sometimes struggles because it lacks a really strong, universally accepted code of professional conduct. It feels like a space where those ethical lines can get particularly, well, fuzzy.
They absolutely can. And I think what becomes clear when you really look at the sophisticated strategies marketers use, especially in advertising, is their power, their ability to persuade and, yeah, sometimes subtly manipulate.
How so?
Well, they can create what some people call artificial needs. They do this by tapping into our emotions, our insecurities maybe, and that can push us towards a more materialistic viewpoint.
Right.
Think about it for yourself.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen an ad and suddenly felt this intense, almost urgent desire for something you genuinely hadn't even considered needing just moments before?
Oh, definitely. Guilty as charged.
It's a really powerful psychological game they're playing.
I think we've all been there. And speaking of subtle influence, what about product placement? That's another interesting one.
Right, yeah.
Sometimes you barely notice it, right? A
Yeah.
specific brand of soda in a character's fridge, or a certain car just happens to drive
It
past.
can be very low-key.
But the criticism is that its sort of concealed nature can blur that line between genuine entertainment and just, well, advertising.
It blends right in.
And here's where it gets really interesting, I think. James Bond films. They've almost become poster children for this, haven't they?
Oh, absolutely. Iconic examples.
In movies like Spectre, you see Bond surrounded by these very specific high-end brands, like Globetrotter luggage, a Sony phone, Macallan whiskey,
The Aston Martin, of course.
of course, Heineken beer, an Omega watch, Tom Ford suits, Warnet sunglasses. The list goes on.
And companies pay literally millions for that kind of placement. It's seen as incredibly valuable.
Because it feels authentic in the context of the film, maybe.
Exactly. It's an incredibly effective way to reach consumers, especially those of us who are getting better and better at just tuning out traditional ads.
Right.
And beyond that, there's another layer. We often see ads that, well, perpetuate stereotypical images.
How do you mean?
You know the ones. Males are frequently shown with power tools or watching sports. Females are often depicted, preparing meals, cleaning the house, looking after children.
Still, even now.
It's still surprisingly prevalent. And then there's the whole overuse of sexual themes and connotations to sell products, often portraying these quite unrealistic images as somehow attainable. And even if we consciously think, oh, that's ridiculous, the sheer consistency of these messages, seeing them again and again, can have a very subtle, cumulative, persuasive impact over time.
That cumulative effect.
Yeah, that's a powerful idea. Now let's shift slightly. What about just basic truth and accuracy in advertising?
Well, obviously, false or misleading advertising isn't just unethical, it's actually illegal in most places.
Sure.
But marketers face these constant ethical dilemmas with language that's, well, ambiguous. Think about words like special, great value, low fat, light, or that classic once-in-a-lifetime offer.
Ah, yeah. Those can mean anything.
Exactly. They can be interpreted in so many ways. Take special, for example. As consumers, we usually hear special and think, oh, cheaper price, a discount, right?
Yeah, that's the default assumption. But for a marketer, special might just mean distinct or different from our usual line. Now, if that ambiguity is deliberately used to make you think it's cheaper when it isn't, well, that's where it crosses the line into unethical territory.
Gotcha.
And we also see what people call weasel words, language that's intentionally vague or misleading, allowing marketers to sort of deny any intent to deceive. They get called out on it later.
Sneaky.
It can be.
Right.
And the consequences, when consumers figure out they've been misled by untruthful ads, they're pretty severe. People feel cheated, obviously.
Yeah, you lose trust immediately.
Exactly. They stop buying the product, they complain to consumer agencies, and the brand itself can suffer really significant long-term reputational damage from that bad publicity.
Really backfires.
Absolutely. And another significant criticism, one that feels more and more relevant today, is the whole invasion of privacy issue.
Oh, yeah. Data tracking.
Right. The practice of tracking web users, collecting data about what you search for, what you click on, and then using that information for highly targeted advertisements. This can easily breach consumer privacy laws.
Can you give an example?
Sure. There was a case back in 2010 involving a company called Blue Kai. They managed to gather specific data about the purchasing intent for about 8 million Australians.
8 million. Wow.
Yeah. Based purely on their online searches for things like holidays, cars, online shopping. Basically building a detailed profile of what they were likely interested in buying.
That's a lot of information.
It's a huge amount of personal, predictive data being collected, often without people fully realizing the extent of it.
Okay.
And then there are related ethical concerns around company sponsorship deals, particularly when they involve schools.
Why schools specifically?
Well, it raises valid questions about direct marketing to children within the school environment and also concerns about the, over-commercialization of education itself. Where does learning stop and marketing begin?
That's a tricky boundary. And sticking with children for a moment, the marketing of junk food to kids faces incredibly strong criticism, doesn't it? Especially from nutritionists and health advocates.
Oh, absolutely. And it's directly linked to rising childhood obesity rates, which is a major public health concern.
Is there a specific example you can point to?
Well, Kellogg's Cocoa Pops O's, for instance, were promoted at one point as being a source of fiber. Which sounds good, right?
Yeah, fiber's healthy.
But if you look closer, they contain 33.4 grams of sugar for every 100 grams of product. That's over a third sugar.
Whoa. Okay, so source of fiber maybe wasn't the whole story.
Not quite. It's quite a juxtaposition, isn't it? And the stats back this up. In Australia, for example, studies have found that something like 1 in every 3 television ads shown during kids' programming times is for food high in fat, sugar, and salt.
1 in 3. That's staggering. What stands out to you most about that particular criticism?
For me, it's the direct link between a marketing practice and a significant public health challenge. It really highlights the potential real-world consequences.
Yeah.
And if we zoom out even further, there are broader criticisms, too. Things like the high cost of advertising being passed on to consumers through higher prices.
Right. We pay for the ads in the end.
Essentially, yes.
Okay.
There's also an argument that advertising itself can waste resources by driving demand for product people don't genuinely need, maybe encouraging overconsumption. Often it feels like the desire to make money just overrides ethical considerations in some cases. And here's maybe a deeper point that connects a lot of these things.
Okay.
While having more goods and services, more stuff can certainly improve our material standard of living, give us more possessions, more conveniences.
Sure.
It doesn't automatically improve our non-material standard of living. By that, I mean things like having more leisure time, living in a cleaner environment, feeling genuine personal happiness, having strong community connections.
Things you can't necessarily buy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And marketing, with its intense focus on driving consumption, tends to emphasize the material, but does it perhaps inadvertently de-emphasize these less tangible, yet arguably more fulfilling aspects of life? That's a really big question to ponder.
Wow, that distinction between material and non-material well-being is, yeah, that's incredibly powerful food for thought. But like you said earlier, it's not all negative. It's not just about the
No,
critiques.
definitely not.
There is a strong push, and we're seeing more and more examples of how businesses can market responsibly and actually provide genuine benefits to communities.
Absolutely. And one of the most straightforward and positive approaches we see is for things like community sponsorships.
How does that work typically?
Well, businesses can actively engage with and support local organizations. Think local sports teams, schools needing equipment, community centers, running programs. They might provide cash donations or donate needed gear. And it's often a genuine win-win situation. The business gets positive brand exposure, maybe their logo on a jersey or a sign at the local park, builds goodwill.
And the community gets much needed support.
Exactly. The local community directly benefits from that vital financial or practical help. It's marketing that contributes positively.
Okay, that makes sense. And building on that positive angle, what about green marketing? That seems to have really taken off.
It really has. Green marketing is basically about promoting and selling products based on their actual, or sometimes just perceived, environmental benefits.
So the idea is that the product itself, or maybe how it's made, is better for the environment.
Precisely. It could be that the product itself is environmentally friendly, or perhaps its production process minimizes waste or pollution. But, and this is important, it's not enough to just, slap an eco-friendly or recyclable label on something and call it a day.
Right, that could just be marketing spin.
Exactly. True green marketing often involves pretty significant effort behind the scenes. Things like modifying products to use sustainable raw materials, genuinely changing production processes to cut down on waste, redesigning packaging to encourage or enable recycling,
Okay.
and even changing advertising practices themselves, like maybe moving away from junk mail pamphlets, for example.
Are there good examples of companies doing this well?
Autonomous shoes often comes up. They're known primarily for their comfortable shoes and their one-for-one giving model, right?
Yeah, buy a pair, give a pair.
Right. But beyond that, they've also made concerted efforts, particularly over the last 5 years or so, to expand their sustainable practices. They're focusing on using more earth-friendly materials in their shoes, actively working to reduce waste and energy use in their supply chain, and offering recycled packaging options.
So it's more integrated into their whole operation?
It seems to be, yes. And what's particularly insightful here, I think, is that governments all around the world are tightening environmental regulations anyway. So businesses that proactively explore and adopt green alternatives aren't just being ethical, they're actually gaining a competitive advantage. They're getting ahead of the curve.
That makes sense. Being sustainable becomes good business strategy.
Definitely. Companies known for environmentally harmful practices tend to attract bad publicity and consumer pushback these days. Customers increasingly say they favor businesses with eco-friendly initiatives.
So anticipating those customer values like environmental concern is clearly smart.
It is, but we also have to be aware of greenwashing.
Greenwashing, what's that?
That's where a company might spend more time, effort, and money marketing itself as environmentally friendly than it spends on actually implementing sustainable practices.
So it's more about image than substance.
Precisely. So for consumers, it becomes really important to look beyond the advertising claims and try to find verifiable evidence of a company's actual environmental actions.
That's a really great cautionary point. Okay, so anticipating genuine values is key. And speaking of values and trust, another area where trust is just absolutely essential is how businesses handle our private information, isn't it?
Oh, it's paramount. Truly. Businesses have this fundamental responsibility to collect, use, and store customer data securely. Protecting privacy isn't optional, it's core.
Are there guidelines for this?
Yes, most countries have data protection authorities. For example, the Australian government's Office of the Australian Information Commissioner, the OAIC, provides really clear guidance.
What sort of things do they recommend?
Well, they have about 10 key tips, but the core principles are things like only collect personal information that's actually necessary for a specific purpose.
Right, don't just grab everything.
Exactly. Be transparent about how you're going to use and disclose that information. Think carefully before sending data overseas. Handle sensitive information with extra care. Make sure only staff who need to access personal information can do so. Keep the information secure against loss or misuse. And crucially, know what your plan is if a data breach does happen.
Having a response plan ready.
Absolutely essential. And these aren't just, bureaucratic rules. They're really the bedrock for building and, just as importantly, maintaining consumer trust in this digital age we live in. Lose that trust over data, and it's incredibly damaging.
We've certainly covered a lot of ground today. We've really taken a comprehensive deep dive, haven't we? From looking at those sharp criticisms often leveled against marketing.
The manipulation, the privacy issues.
Right, delving into all that, all the way through to seeing how socially responsible practices are emerging and the need for really rigorous data management.
And I think understanding these different ethical dimensions is actually incredibly empowering for everyone. It equips you, the listener, to become a more discerning and informed consumer.
Right,
Yes.
so.
Well, by recognizing the subtle pressures, understanding the deliberate choices marketers are making, you can navigate the modern marketplace with a much greater sense of awareness and agency. You're less likely to be swayed unconsciously.
That makes a lot of sense. Being more aware of the mechanics behind it all.
Exactly.
So perhaps the next time an advertisement catches your eye, or you see some marketing claim, maybe take a second. Consider not just the product that's being sold, but reflect on what values that company is truly communicating through its marketing. And then maybe ask yourself, how do those values align or maybe clash with your own vision for a good and fulfilling life, beyond just, what you can buy?